Welcome to World Football Daily's Inside the Ropes edition of a look back at the great broadcaster that is Stephen Cohen and how he actually evolved this whole platform that we find ourselves in right now. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you.
It is a sad day, but it's also a great day because everything comes to an end. You're moving on. You've handed the reins over to me as such, but we want to do for the audience right now is go back to May of 2002 when the whole idea of something that had never been even approached before, which was a football podcast, a football show, bringing that great game to this country. Take us back to May 2002 and the mad idea that you had.
Yeah, I don't even know that podcasting existed at that time, to be fair. And I met a guy called Nick Geber. I was working at a radio station here. He was a client of a radio station there. He was being sort of shifted out of a sort of a corporate takeover that they sort of didn't want. His services were no longer required. I loathed what I was doing, and some people from the sports station that we were working at said, "You guys should get together and do a radio show." And what they really meant was that we should pay them ridiculous amounts of money to put on a radio show at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning when really nobody listened and they had this free time. So they put us together and we met. And what was interesting about when we met was we met at a Starbucks in Manhattan Beach. And I remember driving into the parking lot and getting out of my car and parking next to another car. And as I was walking into the Starbucks, I turned around to look at my car to make sure the lights were off. And I looked and saw my license plate, which said Chelsea fan on it. And I looked to the car next to me, and it was a license plate that said Liverpool fan. And I realized that Geber had already arrived. We sat down, we met, we talked, we realized that we were unhappy doing what we were doing. And we said, we should do this. And it was agreed somewhat there that I would go sell the advertising, he would do the business end of it and the technical side of it. Not that that really ever happened either. And so that's how it was born. We went back to the radio station. We talked to them about, we want to do it. Let's do it. And they said, you'll have to audition. So they made us
to pay money.
Yeah, they were going to make us audition to pay money. So we essentially used to go to Geber's house and sit down. And it was 3 weeks before the World Cup of 2002. And so what we did was we sort of went through the groups and we had our set phrases that we had. And when we got to the sort of the US group, we would say, well, do they have any chance of getting out of the group? And our stock answer was no. And I'll give you 2 words, Luis Figo, because they were in Portugal's group.
Right.
And so it started on May the 11th, 2002. We got up and we did a 1-hour show at AM Fox Sports 1150 in Koreatown, and that's when it was born. I had 2 Red Bulls on my way there, and it was a train wreck. It was a complete and utter train wreck.
Now, what was the football landscape at this time frame in this country with regards to MLS? Would have been 7 years old at the time, getting some success, but not really the success they would have planned for 7 years in. What was the football landscape then like? And give us an idea of just how much visibility the EPL had in this country.
Well, it didn't have very much at all. Number one, MLS, let's talk about the Galaxy. The Galaxy was still playing at the Rose Bowl.
Right.
Okay, I don't even know what networks the MLS was on TV, and whatever they were on, they were paying to be on. That much I do remember. Fox Soccer Channel was Fox Sports World. There was there was no Sirius that I'm aware of. There was no XM that I was aware of. There was nothing. There was no blogging about football. There was no podcasts about football. There was one, and I have to give credit to these guys, these 2 Brians, Brian Quinn and Brian Halliday. There were these 2, both from Northern Ireland. Brian Quinn had actually played for the US, and they had this show called Inside Soccer, which was from San Diego on a computer, and it was beyond dull. It was talking about sort of indoor soccer leagues in America, and this is where Brian Quinn played. And I remember at one point early on in our sort of embryonic sort of evolution, we went down there to meet with them. We met them at a hotel in Anaheim, and we got what you could only be considered the most condescending sort of look as to what we were trying to do. And we walked away with it and we said, we might be paying for it, but we're on radio.
Yeah.
You guys are on the computer, on the internet. And at that particular time, I don't remember anybody who listened to radio on a computer by appointment.
Yeah.
So, the landscape was bare.
Now, you and I were both lucky enough to have attended the '94 World Cup. And of course there was great designs on great soccer success after that. Nothing really happened up until Brandy Chastain took her top off.
Right.
And that was in the women's game. What was your view of MLS in 2002? Had you even been at an MLS game?
No, and I had no interest. I really had no interest because I remember back in 1997 when I first found Fox Sports World. Remember, I'd been in America since '82, so there had been an entire gap of 15 years where I had lost contact with football altogether.
Right.
So when I found Fox Sports World, and it was the Lionel Benvenu show, it was the 90-minute situation that you got the Premier League. This was all I cared about. Didn't care about Spain, didn't care about Italy, didn't care about Germany. Certainly didn't care about some Mickey Mouse league called MLS that they told me was here,
right.
which I knew nothing about. I mean, that was where we were. I mean, the intake you got from '97 to 2002 or so was literally just what you could get off Fox Sports World. Now, ESPN were running some Champions League, but they were doing it in an era where they would rather not have been doing it. Right. And they were only doing it because UEFA had said, if you want the rights to South America, which they did, you have to show it in North America. And that was it.
Now, the initial success that you got, was there any gauge on the amount of listeners? Was there any callers? What was the actual, the outlook of the show at first? I mean, the first few months must have been terribly difficult.
Well, it not difficult, but it was just, we both wanted to talk. The World Cup was coming up, so that made it the right time to start it. And it wasn't terribly difficult. We only had 1 hour to begin with. And
per week?
Yeah, yes, per week. So there were issues as well, because I was working at this radio station, okay? I was working for KFI, and KFI was in the same building as AM 1150 Sports, whatever it was called. The point was, when we got to 3 weeks, after 3 weeks, we thought, right, well, we need some more time. And the World Cup was starting and blah, blah, blah. So we went to Fox Sports at AM 1150 and said, we want another hour, but we want it highly discounted. And they said, no. And so we went across the street, actually into Santa Monica, and started talking to 1540 Sporting News Radio.
Right.
Then we had a decision to make, because I was working at the radio station. I was about to take a show that I was paying them to broadcast, and I was about to leave them while I still worked for their radio station.
And they had no idea.
They had no idea. So when we got to the third or fourth show, the final show, they didn't know it was the final show. We knew it was the final show. And we had to be very careful. And at the end we said, by the way, this is our last show on this station. We'll be on AM 1514 next week on a Sunday. We'll be in 2 hours. And we...
Before they could silence you.
And we got the hell out of there. And on the Monday, I knew I was going to hear it from my bosses, but I'd already made the decision. I was quitting the radio station, and I was going to do the football thing full time. I was going to go out and sell the advertising, and that's kind of when it launched. We went to 1540. We got 2 hours on a Sunday morning, which then moved to a Monday night. And
how difficult was it then? Because nowadays, with what we've done and what we've achieved, the content is there. You can go on and on and on. How difficult was it content-wise then? I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie between you and Nick Geber on the airwaves, but for actual content, talking about games and breaking stuff down, it was a different type of show back then.
Well, I mean, remember, we were in the middle of the World Cup, so it wasn't difficult at this point. We started 3 weeks before the World Cup, and so then you've got the 3 weeks, then the 4 weeks of the World Cup, and we were a weekly show.
Right.
So it wasn't that difficult, but it was really more the emergence of how we were paying for the time wherever we were, whether it was $11.50 or $50. $1,400 for 1 hour. $1,400 for 1 hour at AM 1150, and then we got 2 hours on a Sunday morning, which I think wound up at $2,200. Then we moved to 2 hours on a Monday night. And then it really started to develop later on in 2003.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But then paying out, which even by today's standards was astronomical money. Let's be honest, for a 1 hour gig, trying to monetize it back then, and obviously that was a prowess that a lot of people don't realize just how good you were at monetizing this industry.
Right.
How were you trying to monetize it back then to pay for that?
Well, Fox and Hounds, they were our first advertiser. Umbro.com, who wound up stiffing us. They had offices down in Miami, and they were into us for about $3,000, and we thought, we are sorted. And they wound up stiffing us. I remember talking to a guy on a Saturday morning going, yeah, actually, we're abandoning our American operations. I'm going, that's not good.
Doesn't sound good, yeah.
Well, I went out to Chino and got some tiny little mum and pop medals and trophies store.
Was Kit Bag around back then?
No, they were around, but we hadn't developed it enough, and a lot of it was smoke and mirrors. We had to say we were there and we were putting up this kind of numbers, and this was the signal of the radio station, and it was much bigger than you think it is, and blah blah blah. But it started, so that's how we were doing it with local mom and pop advertisers. We would go to stores offside on Santa Monica Boulevard, paid us some money, and that's how we did it. And the money came in slowly but surely. But no one was going to get rich off of it. And we recognized that we needed more time. We needed more time to buy so we could sell more time. And it became sort of the chicken or the egg. What was going to come first? When we got the 2 hours, that still wasn't enough. Certainly regarding how you were going to make a living off of it. Where it started to change was in 2003. When we found Sports Byline. And Sports Byline were a network based up in San Francisco, but the key to them was they had a channel on Sirius.
Right.
And that was the key moment for us. So when we got to them, we took a Wednesday morning show on Sports Byline, got ourselves on Sirius 122, and then things started to really develop. We had 2 different shows, a Monday night and a Wednesday, and then the little wheels in our brain started to churn.
And then a new studio was always going to be an idea to come around. Walk us through that time frame. When you moved studio.
Yeah, well, we had the show on the Monday night at 1540 in Santa Monica, but we couldn't use their studio on a Wednesday morning. So Giba's idea was essentially to build a studio, and we built a studio just up the street from where we are right now. With really sort of off of eBay and equipment he could get from wherever.
Right.
And he and this guy Chad literally built it and put it together. And on a Wednesday we would go in there, and that's where we would do the show. And we had the equipment that got us up to through ISDN up to Sports Byline, that got us onto Sirius. And then it started to churn, because then we had 2 different shows, 2 very different time slots. One on a Monday night, one on a Wednesday morning in LA, but lunchtime on the East Coast.
Well, there's 2 key components that are about to take place during this time frame, and walk us through that. One of them was obviously Fox Soccer Channel starting to become a little bit more popular, maybe going to show an interest in what we'll talk about next, which was Fox Football Phone-In or Fox Football Friday. And of course, as we discussed on our show yesterday, I think a key figurehead in your success was Jose Mourinho, because he became so popular at Chelsea in the world of football. That was your club at the time. Take us through Fox Soccer Channel finding you and the Jose Mourinho era.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to work out which one came first, actually, because the first year that we were doing any of this was the 2002-2003 season. And the 2002-2003 season, which is where the Liverpool-Chelsea Giba Cohen thing started to really become something. Yeah, in 2003, Chelsea beat Liverpool on the final day of the season to get that 4th Champions League spot. Liverpool were relegated to the UEFA Cup. There was still another year of Claudio Ranieri at Chelsea. They got to the semi-finals of the Champions League, got beat by Monaco. Then after they came second to the Invincibles in Arsenal in the league, and then he was fired, and then Mourinho came in. I don't know, it was sometime in early 2004. We had a couple of meetings, and one of the advertisers, to your earlier question, was Fox Sports World, and it was Fox Sports World, and they advertised on the radio show for very little money. But we'd started to develop a relationship with them, and sometime in early 2004, we got an email, Nick Giba and myself, from a guy called Dermot Macquarie at Fox Sports World, who just simply said, "Don't go out and buy a new shirt just yet, but we're thinking of putting you on TV." And then the world exploded.
Right.
Because at this particular point, we were really just looking at ourselves as 2 boys from North London who had on a wing and a prayer with smoke and mirrors, and we're going, are you kidding? We went in for a meeting. He talked about the set, what the set was going to look like. He said it's going to be a living room. It's going to be.
So they had been listening to the show. They had certainly been.
Yeah,
they'd been made aware and listened to the point where this could be viable.
It was clear that the show was gaining some traction within the football world in the United States, which was fair enough. We were the only one. There was no one else.